A historic shift in the flow of immigrants between the United States and Mexico. According to a Pew Research report published Thursday, more immigrants from Mexico are leaving the United States than are entering the country. And after decades on the rise, the Mexican immigrant population in the United States is actually declining. Joining us from Miami is USA Today immigration reporter Alan Gomez. Alan, it's great to see you. Let's talk a little bit about the numbers here. What does the report show us in terms of Mexicans entering and Mexicans leaving?
Yeah, so to understand what's happening here, let's go back just a little bit. Over the last 30, 40 years, Mexican migration has been the absolute driving force of migration to the United States. From 1970 to just a couple of years ago, the population of Mexican immigrants in the U.S. went from 3 million to nearly 13 million. Then the Great Recession hit, then Mexico's economy improved, then we improved border security even more, and now we're starting to see for the first time those Mexicans really going back in large numbers. And the result is over the last 5 years, more Mexican immigrants went back home than came here. That's a net loss for the country of about 130,000 Mexican immigrants.
So we have that dramatic increase, and then suddenly in 2014, we're seeing a sharp reversal in that trend. Do we know why?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that had to do with the economy here in the United States. Whether it was legal immigration or illegal immigration, a lot of Mexican workers stopped coming to the United States. The jobs just weren't there, so a lot of them decided to stay home. And even those who were living here were having a hard time getting by, just like all other Americans were doing, but they had the option of going back home to Mexico, going back to their families. I think 61% of the immigrants that returned back during this period told Pew that it was to be closer to family and for economic reasons. At the same time, Mexico's economy is absolutely booming right now. It's doing a lot better. Factories are moving from China to Mexico, and things have gotten so much better there that a lot of people also told Pew that their economic situation in Mexico is no different than it is in the United States. So a lot of them have been heading back for that combination of reasons.
Okay, so clearly if 14% were deported, some of those that we're talking about are undocumented workers. How do undocumented workers fit in with the bigger picture of more Mexicans leaving the United States than coming?
Well, absolutely. A big chunk of that is those who are getting deported. The Obama administration continues deporting about 400,000 people a year, and because Mexicans make up the biggest share of the undocumented population, obviously that contributes to it. But at the same time, undocumented immigrants, I've heard people describe them as incredible economists. If you look at sort of the wave of illegal immigration into the country, it mirrors perfectly what the economic situation is in the U.S. So once the recession hit, once jobs started drying up, I mean, we saw slowdowns in construction, we saw slowdowns in the hospitality industry all around the country, and that's a lot of what these workers were doing. So many of them were not coming over here. A lot of them were struggling to find work while they were here. So just like legal immigrants were having trouble finding work, or American citizens were having trouble finding work or were getting laid off, a lot of these undocumented immigrants were the first ones to be laid off. So rather than sit around and just wait for something, a lot of them just went back home.
And this graphic that we're showing is really incredible. It looks like almost 3 million people migrating from Mexico to the United States between 1995 and 2000. Fast forward then from 2009, and not only has the immigration number dropped to 870,000, but the number of people leaving the United States, 1 million people heading from here to Mexico. Can you draw any conclusions about what that means for the rest of Central and South America, for Guatemala and Honduras and Belize and the rest?
Yeah, the Mexican profile is very different from what we're seeing from Central America. Obviously, there's been Central Americans who have been coming to the country throughout this entire period, but their populations are a lot smaller, so they're not going to have that much of an effect. But what we have seen that's incredibly different, gang violence in Mexico has calmed down. You go to a lot of these border regions, so things aren't as violent there anymore. That's no longer one of the bigger causes for Mexicans to leave. But when you look at countries like Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, we saw it last summer with the unaccompanied minors that were racing to the border by the tens of thousands. I think it was something close to 70,000 unaccompanied minors, and ended up coming to the United States last year, fleeing gang violence in those countries. That's how bad gang violence has gotten in those countries, and so that's why we're seeing a lot of those Central Americans coming. But what's interesting is that when we talk about Mexican migration, whether it's illegal or illegal, it's mostly been based on economic reasons. A lot of these Central American migrants that are trying to make make their way in here, they more fit the profile of a refugee. So we've seen asylum cases skyrocket over just the last few years, and we've seen a lot of them trying to come in here arguing that they're refugees because they're fleeing violence. It's not so much an economic thing like we've seen with Mexico.
Alan Gomez, it's nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.